Hey, Chandler Bolt here, and joining me today is Wendy Weiss. Wendy is the founder of Salesology. She's the creator of the Salesology prospecting method. She's an author, having written multiple books. She's been featured in the New York Times and a bunch of other places. She's got clients, including people you know, probably know, like Avon, ADP, New York Life, tons of entrepreneurs and big companies as well. Today we're going to be talking about sales. Dun dun dun. Some of you love it, some of you hate it, some of you love to hate it. We always talk about Sam and sales and marketing and putting your Sam hat on and learning to embrace sales and marketing. Well, today we're going to zoom in on the S in Sam, which is sales, and Wendy's a great resource to do that. So Wendy, welcome. How are you?
I am fabulous. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, I want to start with this. So you mentioned right before this, we were talking. You said I published one. I think it was your first book or one of your first books,
Yes.
and used that book to start a business. We were kind of talking. Hey, a lot of the folks in our audience, some of them they have a business already, and they want to plug in their book and just scale that business. Some folks are thinking, hey, I just wrote the book. I didn't even know there was a whole business on this. So it's kind of like this big leap. We'll talk about obviously sales skills to scale your already existing business later. But for starters, what was that journey like for you? And how did you go from publishing the book to starting a business on the back end of that?
That is a great question. Thank you so much for asking. And I'm actually going to take a couple of steps back. My company is Salesology. We're sales trainers. We teach business owners and entrepreneurs how to grow their business. And I was never supposed to be a sales trainer. My first career was actually I danced in a ballet company. And I danced with Pittsburgh Ballet Theater and I danced with the Cincinnati Ballet. As you may know, ballet is one of the most difficult and exacting art forms. And I got into my current career completely by accident because I needed a day job and in between dance gigs. And I got a job with a telemarketing agency that did business development. And lucky for me, they taught me this skill set. It was life-changing because a few years later, it enabled me to build a business. And so what happened was I pretty much danced till I couldn't walk. I needed a hip replacement. And I started to think, well, what should I do? Since I'm not going to be able to keep dancing professionally. And I took a class at the Learning Annex in New York City. I'm dating myself because the Learning Annex is no longer around, taught by Fred Gleek. A shout out to Fred. It was called How to Be $1,000 a Day Consultant. It was in the late 90s. And Fred's whole philosophy was write a book because you become an instant expert. And he gave us the book formula, which was 25, I remember it to this day, 25 topics, write 4 subtopics under each topic, write 2 pages on each. You have a 200-page book.
Mm.
So I said to myself, what do I know how to do that people will pay me for? Well, I know how to do business development. I'll write a book on cold calling. And I wrote my first book using Fred's formula. It came out in 2000. It was called Cold Calling for Women. It had a big pink phone on the cover, and I self-published. And that is how I launched my training business, was by writing that book.
Mm, I love that. And I also love how specific you were with that book. I think a lot of times people they try to please everyone with their book and they're scared to niche down. But I'd love for you to speak on that. Was that successful? Are you glad that you did that? And I'm talking about specifically going cold calling for women and kind of leaning into that.
Oh, absolutely. First of all, just writing the book, I knew what I was doing because I'd been trained at that day job all those years ago. But I didn't have a process to share it with somebody else. And writing the book, just getting it down, enabled me to outline the process and the model that I still use to this day. And deciding to write a book called Cold Calling for Women as opposed to Cold Calling for Everyone, it's kind of a funny story. My metaphor is dance. I believe that everything I know in life and in business, I learned in ballet class. And I use the model, which we can go through, but I use the model that I learned in ballet class as a framework for sales. And so when I wrote Cold Calling for Women, it was all kind of about how cold calling is a lot like dancing. And as I was writing it, I was sharing the book with colleagues that I'd met along the path, asking for, testimonials and things so I could market it when it was done. And somebody that was a fairly famous and well-known sales trainer said to me, "No guy is ever going to read this book. Call it Cold Calling for Women." Because I was writing about being a ballet dancer. And I thought, that's interesting. So then I did some research, and at the time, I think it was women bought something like 67 or 70% of all the trade paperbacks in the market. So I thought, okay, cold calling for women. And one of the things that I did learn through this process, and it was really very transformational for me, because as a dancer, you are always reaching for perfection. But all I had to do for the book was to write it. I had to get it down on paper. It did not have to be perfect. It just had to be written. And that was a very freeing experience, because I know as a dancer, and then also from working with many of my clients, when you think everything's got to be absolutely perfect, it is really hard to take steps forward.
Yeah. Done is better than perfect a lot of times,
Yes.
especially with the rough draft of your book, right? Then you can get it edited, then you can improve it, then you can make it better. But you can't edit or publish a rough draft that you haven't finished, right? And so getting it done. I love just going back to just niching down here, because again, I think so many people would just say, "Oh man, I can't do that. I got to write cold calling for everyone." I have a hunch, but I'd love to hear if this is true or not, that you still had men buy the book.
I had tons of men buy the book.
So tell me about that.
I used to, when the book came out, I did a lot of speaking, and I, go to various events or networking groups or whatever. And I would talk about prospecting and business development. And then of course I would have my book for sale there. And men would come up to me and go, pick up a copy of the book, and they'd say, "This is for men too, right?" And I'd say, "Right." And they'd buy the book.
Cool. That's funny. And I think that's, so I'm just double clicking, triple clicking on this point for everyone listening. Don't be afraid to niche down with your book and with your topic. Wendy, I want to shift gears a little bit. Let's talk sales. I think a lot of people listening to this or might have a preconceived notion. Might think, "Oh, that's great for Wendy. That's great for Chandler. They like sales, or they're good at sales." Do you feel like sales is nature or nurture? And what's your advice for the trepidatious person who's like, "Hey, I know that I need to learn this skill, but I'm a little bit scared to do it"?
That's a great question. That's sort of the foundational question. And, I will share with our audience, there's this myth of the born salesperson, that somehow there are these people out there that are just born knowing what to do and knowing what to say. This is a myth. It's not true. I'm not a born salesperson. I'm a lucky person, because when I got that day job all those years ago, they taught me this skill set. Learning this skill set was transformational. It enabled me to build a business. And the great Russian ballerina Anna Pavlova, she danced in the late 19th and early 20th century. First ballerina to tour the world with her own company. She very famously said, "No one arrives from talent alone. Work transforms talent into genius." Anna Pavlova was born with a lot of talent to dance. And then she trained at the Imperial Russian Ballet School. which enabled her to join the Imperial Russian Ballet. And if she hadn't done that, she would never have done any of the things that she did later in her life. You know, we just finished the Olympics. All of those athletes, they had a lot of talent, but they also trained. You know, think of all the talented athletes that are out there that have never made it to the Olympics or played pro sports. Talent alone is not enough. It is a learned skill. So the really good news is you can learn how to do it.
And then I want to get into some of the frameworks that you teach, and you talked about learn from ballet. Before we do that, for those who don't know, what's the difference between sales and prospecting as you see it, and why are both important?
They're both absolutely important. And the thing that's too bad is that prospecting is often taught as a subset of sales, and it's actually a very specific skill set. And the way I think about it is it's like dating. If you want to go on a date with someone, you've got to ask them first. If and when they say yes, then you go on the date. So prospecting is like asking for the date. Selling is like going on the date. So essentially what you are doing when you are prospecting is saying to someone that you don't really know or don't really know very well, I'd like to have a conversation with you about whatever it is you do. Mm-hmm. And when they say, yes, I'd like to have that conversation, then you have the conversation. So mm-hmm. it's two different skill sets.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. I think some call them, it's like hunters or farmers or, like different types of sales and stuff. What, let's start to talk about kind of some of the frameworks that you teach, and through that lens, are they different with prospecting and sales? Is there some overlap, mostly the same? How do you teach that differently based on if someone is dedicated to prospecting versus selling?
That's a great question. The framework remains the same. The difference is within the steps of the framework, prospecting versus selling. So I said earlier that I believe that everything I know in life and business, I learned in ballet class. And this is what I learned in ballet class. It's my 3-step salesology model. If you're a ballet dancer and you have a performance, you don't just run out on stage and start dancing. You have to warm up, because if you don't warm up, you risk having a career-ending injury. Elite athletes do the same thing. They're not running out on the field and just playing the game. They warm up so that they don't have a career-ending injury. There are things that you, as a business owner, entrepreneur, there are things you need to have in place so that you don't hurt yourself and you don't hurt your bottom line. That's your warm-up. And that is things like a clear definition of your prospect. What makes a great lead for you in your market with your offering? Who do you serve? And a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, we were talking about niching down before. You've got to do that. You've got to know who you're speaking with, because that then enables you to have the relevant conversation. And you also need to know how are you going to try and engage with people. Are you calling them? Are you emailing them? Are you texting them? Are you reaching out on social media? Like, what are you doing? What is your process? So these are all elements of the warm-up. Just what are the steps? Who you're reaching out to, what are you going to do? What's your message? You have to have that in place so that you don't hurt yourself. The next step number 2, is to rehearse. If you're a dancer and you have a concert coming up, again, you don't just run out on stage and start dancing. You have been rehearsing for months. And when you rehearse, you learn the choreography, you learn the steps, and you practice them over and over and over again until you don't have to think about it. You can just execute. It's muscle memory. So the same is true whether it's prospecting or sales. You need to have that rehearsal process that you're prepared, so that when you're speaking with a prospect, you know how you're going to introduce yourself, you know how you're going to answer questions, because we know what people ask and we know the objections that prospects have. So just you're prepared. And then the third step, once you have warmed up, so like everything's set up so you don't hurt yourself, you've rehearsed, you have automatic muscle memory. Step 3, then and only then is it time to perform. The problem is most people they just skip the warm-up and the rehearsal. And that doesn't work. And here's the other thing that is so wonderful about following these 3 steps. Lots of people, and you mentioned it, Chandler, a lot of people say they're scared. They're afraid of being rejected, or, and to me, this is a lot like stage fright. And I have been there. You're waiting in the wings, you're waiting for your cue, your heart is pounding, your palms are sweaty, and you think you are going to throw up. But then you hear your music and you get out on stage and you dance. Well, what enables you to do that when you're so scared? Well, you've warmed up. So you're prepared. You've rehearsed. You've got automatic muscle memory. That's what enables performance. That's what enables execution. And what I've seen in all the years I've been doing this is, for most people, when they have a system and they're following the system and they know what they're doing every step along the path, and they've rehearsed, so they have that automatic muscle memory, a lot of that fear goes away. It enables them to be effective. And so that system, that's the salesology system.
Love it. And I think, to your point, the better the warm up, the better the rehearsal, the more confident the performance. Right?
Exactly.
So it becomes a positive loop instead of a negative loop of, hey, I didn't warm up, I didn't really rehearse, I went to perform, it went horribly. Okay, now I'm never doing this again, or I'm going to be very trepidatious and lack confidence the next time I do it. And sales is a transfer of emotion, and the person with the most certainty wins, right? And so if you're not confident on that call, well, then that leads to a lot more no's, which leads to less. It's kind of like this doom loop. Do you ever find, Wendy, you said a lot of people skip the warm up and rehearsal stage and go straight to perform. I could see that being the case, especially in companies where you have opportunities kind of put on your plate. I could almost see the opposite being true for startups or people who are trying to get their first customers. Is they spend all their time warming up, rehearsing, as almost like an avoidance of doing the thing that they need to do, which is prospect and get opportunities so that they can then have an opportunity to perform. Do you see that, or no? If so, what's your recommendation for someone to kind of persevere through that and get their first opportunities or at bats on their calendar?
That is a great question, because it's very much like what we were talking about with writing a book. At some point, done is better than perfect. You've got to write the book. And it's true here as well. And part of the process is the execution, because like any kind of marketing campaign, or even if you're taking a ballet class, you're always tweaking what you're doing, but you have to do it in order to tweak it. And so one of the things that we have our clients do, if they're really uncomfortable, we will have them put together a list of practice leads. I always recommend you divide your leads into A's, B's, and C's. And the A's are the great ones. That's like your wish list. You really want to work with that company. B's are really good. C stands for crummy. So put together a list of C leads and practice on them. It's going to be low stress. You're not going to blow any great opportunities. And you get to try things out. And once you've done that, then you can start calling your A's and B's.
Cool. I like that a lot. That's really good. So start with C leads. What would be, because I want to get into more advanced stuff here in just a second, but one last question on the beginner side of things. What would be your tips for folks? Let's say, hey, I've published my book and now I'm struggling to get my first at bats. So my first people on the phone to actually have a sales conversation and see about working with me. What are your thoughts or recommendations for those folks specific to prospecting, maybe even using their book to get first at bats or first sales conversations?
Well, it's really interesting because when I was writing my book, it wasn't finished. It wasn't published. I just started telling people I'm writing a book. And telling people that you are writing a book is almost as good as having written a book.
Right.
People get very impressed. And you can use that as an entree to the conversation that you want to have. I used to go to various networking events and say, talking to people and, hey, yeah, I'm writing a book. It's on cold calling. They'd be very impressed. They'd want to know more. And I was able to have that conversation. Later on, when I actually had the book, I was able to give it out. I gave it away, gave it to people that I wanted to talk to. When you give people a gift, they are much more likely to want to engage with you. It's reciprocity. So that's just very easy, on this topic. Use your book that you are writing or that you've finished. Use that as an entree. And the other thing is, this is really a skill set. When you think to yourself, I'm just going to start calling people. There's a lot of, that's a great impulse, but there's a lot of things the warm up that you need to have in place first. And if you need help doing that, get yourself some help. We have all sorts. Our website is gosalesology.com. We have all sorts of resources available there. If you hate everything I'm saying today, go find somebody else. There's help out there.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. And so I heard a few things there that stuck out. One was use your book as the entree. And so for a lot of folks, just saying, hey, here's a copy of my book for free, digital, physical, whatever else. Hey, I'd also love to chat with you further about how I can help you implement this in your business, right? It's just a good, straightforward ask. Also, when you're publishing your book and marketing your book, it's a great warm up for this, especially for people who have never done it before. One of the big things as an author, you're asking for reviews. It's one of the most important things for the success of your book. So it's not a sale, right? But it at least gets you out of your comfort zone to get a yes or a no of, hey, can you leave a review on my book? And then one thing that's really helped with me, there was a guy on the podcast the other day, Ray Higdon. He talked about go for no. And it's just like getting 5 no's a day, which actually, as I've started trying this, it's really hard. It's really hard to get 5 no's a day, but just shifting that framework of, hey, I'm not scared of no's. I need to get them to hit my quota for the day. It was a really interesting reframe for me to just encourage prospecting and encourage asking people. Just like, hey, here's a specific ask or a specific thing that they have the ability to say yes or no to.
Yes. And I'll piggyback on what you just said and share. I used to have a friend named Arlene who was an actress. And this was the game, I dubbed it Arlene's game, but this is the game that she would play when going to auditions, because as I'm sure everybody knows, auditions are really hard and you can get a lot of no's. So she would give herself 1 point every time she went to an audition and did not get the job. When she got to 100, she won. She would get herself a prize, and it wasn't necessarily a big prize. Maybe she went to a movie she wanted to see. She'd do something nice for herself to reward herself for getting 100 points, 100 no's. And the thing is, if you get 100 no's, there are going to be some yeses in there, because as you said, Chandler, it's hard to get that many no's. So if you do that consistently, just play Arlene's game. Give yourself a point for every no. Get to 100. Give yourself a prize. that kind of shifts your focus and enables you to do what you need to do.
Love that. Play the game. A couple final questions, and we'll go a little bit more advanced. Let's talk about. Oh man, I could ask hours of questions on sales stuff. Let's talk about. I want to do one more advanced question and like an on the spot case study, which I think will be fun. What do you feel like are the skills it takes or the traits that you look for someone to be great at sales? So these are either skills or traits that people can foster who are trying to get good at sales, or skills to look for when hiring great sales talent.
Two great questions. So I'll start with the first one, just the traits of somebody that would make a great salesperson. Because again, there's this myth about the born salesperson and like these people with the gift of gab, and I mean, that is complete BS. It is not true. I'm an introvert. Introverts make great salespeople because they can listen. So you're not necessarily looking for somebody that can talk nonstop. The biggest determining factor for me is someone open to learning this skill and doing something that is different from whatever it is they're used to doing. We have people that come to our programs that don't really want to do anything that's different from what they're used to doing, and nothing changes when you do that, when if you're not open. But if you're open and you're willing to try things, then you can learn. And so that to me is the biggest determining factor. In terms of hiring, here are the mistakes that I see. Business owners come to me and say, I want to hire a salesperson. I say, great. What do you have in place for them? The answer is usually nothing. If you want to hire a salesperson, there are things you need to have in place for them. And going back to the warm-up, clear definition of what's a great lead, clear definition of the process, clear definition of the message. They're telling your story. You want them to tell it well. So you need to have these things in place for them. You need to have it benchmarked. One of the things that we do in our programs is we help people track what they're doing so that they know exactly how they're doing and what works, because numbers don't lie. So if you know your numbers, then you can hire someone. They should be able at a bare minimum to do what you do, since you're doing a million other things. So you need to have that in place. And here are the two pieces of advice that I give my clients that are looking to hire, that do have their process defined and in place. The first thing is, you're looking for someone that can talk. So set up a voicemail. Don't have them send you resumes. Set up a voicemail and have them leave you a message. Because if they can't leave a coherent message, they're not going to be a really great salesperson. So start there.
That's a really fun idea. Sorry, I think you had one more.
One more. And then when you're interviewing people, I have a client that has said to me on multiple occasions that the best sales job some of his salespeople ever did was getting him to hire them. So what you want to do is find out if someone is coachable. And so when you are interviewing them, have them do some kind of role play. Give them a script, or have them sell you a pencil, or just have them do something. Critique them. Tell them to go home and practice, and then have them come back. The people that you're looking for will take whatever it is you've told them to do, and they'll work on it and they'll fix it. You don't want to hire the people that give you all the reasons that they did what they did and how they did it at their old job, and they think there's a better way of doing it and they want to tell you. Those are not the people you're looking for.
Right.
So those are my 2 cents, my 2 pieces of advice. If you are looking to hire, 3 pieces: have the process documented.
Hmm.
You're looking for people that can talk, and you're looking for people that are coachable.
That's great. That's great. Coachable. They're a learner, probably. They're hungry. All those things translate really well. I want to do a little mini case study here and get your take on this. Hopefully, this will be helpful for the audience. So, we have a sales team of, gosh, we've got probably 4 or 5 SDRs and maybe 6 or 7 sales reps. So for people listening who don't know, SDR is kind of prospector or setter, like Wendy was talking about. Sales reps, or some would call it a account executive, right? So we've been all remote, and literally just yesterday we opened our first ever office. So we're about 50, 60 employees in total. We opened our first office, and we're building on an in-person sales team. And what's super interesting to me is, previously when we're recruiting, when we're hiring, all that stuff, I mean, we can hire anywhere. I mean, they need to be on a decent time zone, but US, Canada, South America, as long as they're good, speak great English, and can sell, we can hire from anywhere. And now we're really shrinking that, obviously, because we're building out an in-person office. And it's just a totally new learning curve. So I guess my question for you, Wendy, would be, how would you approach that if you were me? And how would you look for or change your recruiting approach to get really good local sales talent?
I'm not sure that the approach would change significantly. I mean, you still need to have that process in place. You're still looking for people that can talk,
Mm-hmm.
and you're still looking for people that are coachable. It's obviously the area where you are recruiting has shrunk. And so that to me is, you still need to have those 3 things in place.
Right. I guess my question is on the recruiting front, because we definitely have all those in place. We've got a really
Okay.
good, well documented sales process that similar criteria is what you're talking about. We don't have the voicemail thing. I like that a lot. And just testing early on in our interview process, we'll do calls. We'll have people do a couple calls and just listen, and give them our script and say, hey, do a couple calls. Let's review, and that's like a part of our interview process. We're based in Austin, Texas. And so I guess the real puzzle for me is like, okay, you have kind of like Indeed, you have LinkedIn, you have other places that you can recruit and kind of cast a wide net. Those still exist, obviously, in Austin, but to your point, it's much more localized. And so my brain's kind of spinning on, hey, where is that talent in this city that we go recruit? Like anything you've seen for local recruiting that's worked really well?
Well, I think use your local network. If you've got people that are already on your team, who do they know that might be a great salesperson? I was talking to a client yesterday who they've got a couple people on their team right now that are not really working out, and she's like, that's okay, because I want to hire my daughter, and there are 3 or 4 people from my previous job that I also want to hire. So she's all prepared. If these people that are not working out, if they leave, she's got a plan B, and she's got
Mm,
people that she's already vetted because she knows them,
mm-hmm.
and so I think that, especially when you're recruiting locally, your people know people,
Mm-hmm.
and they know what the criteria are because they're already on the team. They know what they had to go through. They know what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that is the resource that I would leverage, is the people you already know.
Cool. Love it. A lot to learn. It's a lot of fun. Wendy, couple final questions for you. One would be, knowing what you know now, what would be your parting piece of advice specific to learning and getting good at the skill set of sales for all of our authors out there?
Well, I'll go back to what I said earlier. This basically what we're talking about is the communication skill. It can be learned. And actually we have a gift for our audience that will help, because we have been talking today about sales mindset. And so the gift that I have for everyone today is the Master Your Sales Mindset video series. And it's a series of short videos to help you just kind of reframe the way you're thinking about this, because that's really where it all starts, is in your head. And once you're open to learning, then you can learn. So, and I believe you have the link, Chandler, and you'll be able to put that out there with this podcast. So, you know, I invite people to do that, and also to visit us at gosalesology.com. Connect with me on LinkedIn, and listen to my podcast wherever you get your podcasts. It's Salesology Conversations with Sales Leaders, because these are all resources that you can use to educate yourself to learn this skill set, which is a perfectly learnable skill set. I did it. And if I did it, you can do it.
Cool. I love that. I'm looking you up on LinkedIn right now, Wendy. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this. Check out, we've got the link in the show notes to this free gift that Wendy just mentioned, the sales mindset training. So go to the show notes. You'll find the link there. It's the Master Your Sales Mindset free training. Wendy, thank you so much. This was awesome.
Thank you, Chandler. Thanks.